Hey, seventh graders, welcome to Module 7, which is the start of our last part of the unit on proportions and rates, and it's the start of studying percents, because percents are a special type of rate. So learning target, you will be able to convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. So just getting familiar with recognizing equivalent forms of the same amount to help us with our percent work. So here we go. Converting fractions to percents. A fraction can be written as a percent when the denominator is 100, right? Percents are always out of 100. If the denominator is a friendly number, meaning it can go into 100, you can scale up or down or use a proportion. We know that word, right? We can use a proportion. So take a look at this chart with me. If the fraction is 3/25, and I want to know what percent that is, I'm going to use a proportion to help me figure that out. Okay, so 3/25, and I want to scale it up to something out of 100, because that will tell me what percent it is. I'm thinking to myself, 25 times what is 100? Like, how much is this thing kind of scaling up? Just like we did with all those equivalent rates and all those tables we looked at, it's all about multiplication and division relationships. Well, I know 25 times 4 is 100. So I'll do the same to the top, right? Making sure it's equivalent. And 3 times 4 is 12. So 12 100ths is the same as 12%. Let's try the next one. I'm going to scale this up to 100. 50 times 2 is 100. So I will do 35 times 2 for the numerator, and that gives me 70. So 70 100ths is the same as 70%. And then this last one, 19 20ths, I want to set up this proportion of these two equivalent fractions. 20 times 5 is 100. So if I take 19 20ths and multiply it by 5/5, I will get what percent that is. So I know 20 times 5 is 100, and I'm going to subtract a group of 5, and I get 95. So 95 100ths, you of course can go over here and kind of do the work. I was just thinking through that in my head. So that would be 95%. Okay, so I want to just point out we can use proportions with fractions, right, to help us figure out the percent, which is what it is out of 100. Converting decimals to percents. A decimal can be converted to a percent by multiplying by 100. And when we multiply by 100, we notice that the decimal moves 2 places to the right. So this example, I'm going to just make it larger. If I have a decimal, 85 100ths, you might even be picturing this in your mind. 85 100ths would be 85%. And the movement of the decimal, right, we're multiplying it by 100, and that's why it ends up as a whole number, 85%, even though percents aren't whole numbers. Let's try this one. So if I took 7/10 and I multiplied it by 100, I'd move it twice over. It'd be here. I would have that placeholder. I would use a 0 for the placeholder, and that's why it's 70%. And then sometimes we can have percents over 100. So in the decimal 1 and 25 hundredths, if I move the decimal over twice to the right because I'm multiplying by 100, that would equal 125%. Okay, that's converting decimals to percents. Converting fractions to decimals, in case you need to kind of do a little bit of work here, a fraction can be converted to a decimal by dividing the numerator by the denominator. That's one option. Another strategy that I'm going to put on here is you can also use a proportion that has a base 10 denominator, because decimals are out of base 10, right? Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and so on. So in this example, 3/4, I'm going to show you two different ways. 3/4, I could go ahead and do the long division. 3 divided by 4, the numerator is the dividend. And let's see, it's not a whole number. 4 can't go into 3 a whole amount of times, a whole group amount of times. 4 can go into 37 times because that's 28. Subtract, the difference here is 2. I can add a 0, drop it down to keep going. 4 can go into 25 times equally, right? Nothing left over. So the decimal is 0.75. But I also want to show you that you could use a proportion and scale it up to, again, base 10 is 10, 100, 1,000, because that's where that's what our decimal place values are. So 4, going into 10 wouldn't be like a whole group amount. So I'm going to scale it up to 100, because I know that 4 times 25 gives me 100. So I would do the same to the 3. 3 times 75 is, or 3 times 25 is 75. And now that I have this fraction in with a base 10 denominator, I know that that is the same as writing it like this. So kind of two options for fractions to decimals. Okay, and then let's just do a couple examples. So 3/8, I need to turn it into a decimal and a percent. So here it is, a fraction. I'm going to choose to just do the long division because 8s, I could do the proportion, but it may take me a while. I'll just do the division. 3 divided by 8. Set it up. 8 can go into 30. 3 groups, because that would be 24 with 6 left over. Make it 60. 8 can go into 60 7 times, because that'd be 56. 4, and then make that 40, and 8 can go into 45 times. So the decimal is 375 thousandths. And to change it to a percent, I multiply it by 100. That'd be 37.5%. Okay, the next one, 1/25. I'm going to scale that up to 100 because that's times 4. That's times 4. So that'd be 4/100ths, which would look like, here's the tenths place, here's the hundredths place, 4/100ths. And I multiply the decimal by 100 to get the percent. So I would move it over. I'll just write it down here. Boink, boink. And then be 4%. Okay, mixed number. 1 4/5. So 1 4/5. Again, I'm going to use base 10. I think it's faster. Is equivalent to 5 times 2 is 10. So double. That would look like 1 and 8 tenths in the tenths place. Multiply that by 100 to turn it to a percent. So it would be there. I'd fill it in with a 0 and 180%. Does that make sense? Yes, because this fraction is more than one whole. So I know the percent will be more than 100%. Last one, 2 1/3. Okay, I know that if I went over here to the side and divided 1 by 3, you can even try this in the calculator, it'll give you a repeating decimal of 3 each time. And I don't know if you remember, but way back in the beginning of the year, we learned that this bar notation helps us just kind of shortcut and show that that digit is repeating in this decimal. So this decimal is 2.3 repeating on and on and on. And then the percent, if I multiply it by 100, right? I can just call this, I can just round and just call it 233%. Or sometimes we see it written like that. Okay. So I provided a couple slides here just as a tool, like as a kind of a poster visual for you to reference if you want to just follow step by step of how to change one form of a number into another form, like fraction to percent, decimal to percent, and then these two, fraction to decimal, and the other way around. So please reference those if you need to. And have fun converting. And I look forward to your work. Happy learning.